Reverend LeRoy L. Gill. This is all presentation that all doctor ministry students have to complete for the work that they've done over the last 3 years with joy and tears and pain. And he has 24 minutes to give us an overview of the work that he's done. And so we're going to get started now. I invite you to come and share as you will.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lally. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. As she was talking about the joy and pain, it reminded me of the, Negro spiritual. We've come this far by faith. By way of quick introduction, I want to acknowledge a few people who are with me today. Most significantly, my wife, Robin Gill, who's here. She serves really as an ex-official member. She served as an ex-official member of the dissertation team. It's always being by my side and supporting me, so I thank you very much there. Reverend George Hagler, a member of the dissertation team, he pastors a church in the Bronx. And then in the middle is Dr. John Plateau, who is part of the administration as well as on the faculty at Medgar Evers College in Brooklyn, New York. The other 3 members of the dissertation team who regret not being here this morning include Dr. Amanda Speaks Lewis, who's on the faculty at Long Island University. And then it includes Crystal George, and finally Anthony Kirby. And by way of introduction to the subject of the role of the church in education reform, I do want to give you a sense of my own sort of formation, right? Why this subject and why I chose it. And it largely, I think, has to do with my early upbringing. I attended Concord Elementary School, where it sowed the seeds in me of my own sort of Christian formation. Dr. Peter Parris, who's written on the subject, calls the Black church a surrogate world. And in many respects, as I look back on my own life, it sort of nurtured and shaped me both academically as well as in my Christian faith. Attached to the elementary school is this large historic African-American church, Concord Baptist Church. And it is through and with Concord Baptist Church in my adult years, I formed with Anthony Kirby a mentor program from the church. It was called One Brother to Another. And it was really an opportunity for the church to then engage with the community. We partnered with a low-performing elementary school right in the heart of Bedford-Stuyvesant, just a stone's throw away from the church. And we had some of the elder members mentor some of the young boys in the community who were at risk. And at risk, as we defined it, were those who were living in female-headed households, a juvenile delinquent in their behavior, and not performing well academically in the school. And so through those earlier experiences that I realized education was important. The role of the church in shaping and molding education was critical. And to whom much is given, much is required. So I pushed this issue forward. So my topic is making bricks without straw, the role of the African American churches in Southwest Philadelphia's public school crisis. My challenge statement is, I've observed that the Black church has retreated from its historic role of partnering with the community to ensure that students receive a quality public education. The Philadelphia Public School District has the most persistently low-performing schools in the state. Lack of confidence in this system has led to both Black flight and a mass exodus from the public schools to private and charter schools by the more resourceful parents, leaving behind the truly poor and disadvantaged. This demonstration project will develop a strategic plan to assist the Black church in organizing with the community to improve the quality of education for the poor and underserved. I wanted to share with you the location of Southwest Philadelphia. I wanted to use this Google map to kind of, it makes, I think, a subtle but significant statement, right? Southwest Philadelphia is in the bottom. It's in the bottom of the city of Philadelphia. In many respects, Southwest Philadelphia is treated as though it's in the bottom, not just geographically, but politically, socially, economically, that community is fixed in the bottom. It's in the bottom in the context of the city of Philadelphia as it relates to a public school system. Within, say, the last 5 years, the school district as a whole has been hemorrhaging with a budget deficit of about $100 million. So it requires significant cost saving to close that gap. The school district embarked on closing 23 schools, which was unprecedented in the last 2 years, and laid off 5,000 teachers. There's been a state takeover of the school in the city. More than half of the high school students do not graduate with high school diplomas. That's the sort of the larger context that scaffolds over what is really a significant crisis within the Southwest Philadelphia community. The involvement of churches, one church that was involved in this effort was Mount Zion Baptist Church within that community. Here is Reverend Cedric Jones, the pastor of that church. The other church that was involved in this project was Ezekiel Baptist Church, also in the community. What is not obvious, but is also important for our purposes, is that what surrounds this community is a lot of industrial plants, old manufacturing facilities. What we see in this picture, and I want to point out, is that the parking lot of the church, and there's a lot of cars that's filled there. That's reflective of the fact, I would suggest, that most of the members of that church are commuters. They don't live in the community. And that has significance, as I will speak to in a little while. One of the 23 schools that was closed in the city was this public elementary school. This public elementary school was adopted by Mount Zion Baptist Church. Despite its best efforts, the city decided to close Alexander Wilson Public School and enforce many of those elementary school students to travel a longer distance to attend school. Some of the demographics in Southwest Philadelphia. It's a blighted community that's predominantly African American. It has a little more than 80,000 residents who mostly live in wood frame row homes. The area lacks a vibrant commercial strip, and it desperately needs some housing redevelopment as well as economic redevelopment. As I said, residents are surrounded by abandoned factories, industrial plants, commercial dump site. Commercial dump site, as well as a railroad, old freight train system, is right in a buttress at Ezekiel Baptist Church. Oddly enough, in my research, what social scientists say is that Southwest Philadelphia is an environmental hazard. But in communicating with people, no one in that community seems to raise that as an issue. Median household income is $33,000. It's below the city's average. 42% of the households are headed by single parents. Only 23% of the residents in that area who are 18 and older hold a high school diploma. 85% of the students in the public schools there attend or receive and qualify for free lunch. So those are the sort of financial challenges that exist in the school, right, in that community, economically. Two of the high schools that's in that community have been on the state's persistently not only low performing list, but also dangerous school list. During the time I was working on my demonstration project, the high school, John Bertram, an incident in which one student literally assaulted and left the teacher unconscious. Many people argue that that's a result of the financial cutbacks, where there's not enough teaching staff or social work staff within the school building. Past that. There we go. Okay. So the project issue. Can the African American churches build the capacity to develop a plan that sets forth its requirements for what constitutes a quality public education for the children of Southwest Philadelphia? and achieve the support of other stakeholders such as political and business leaders. That was sort of the inquiry that I was embarking on. The challenges for this project as things unfolded are, as I understood them, are as follows. African American churches have not united in a collaborative effort to demand better schools for the community. Theological and denominational differences have resulted in fragmentation. The churches are largely comprised of congregants that are communities who have little stake or involvement in the community. Parents and students lack faith in the current school system and prefer to enroll children in parochial, private, or charter schools. This gets back to, this sort of confirms my premise that I worked on from the beginning of this exodus from the public school system. They've abandoned and hope in the public school system. So I have discovered that many people have opted out, and who have the resources opt out and have their children going into alternative educational opportunities. Pastors' reservations about providing access to the congregation was one of the challenges I confronted. And I'll say a little more about that now. And that is quite understandable, is that pastors are the gatekeepers for their congregations. And in many instances, because people are always interlopers coming into their communities, they have become, of course, very reticent about opening themselves up to people that they are not acquainted with. And so there was a challenge in my getting access to more of the churches in the area. Solutions to the challenges. What I think is the primary importance in that community is for the clergy to have its own identity. So the formation of something that would look like a Southwest Philadelphia Ministerial Alliance would be, I think, significant. As I mentioned, one of the challenges were differences around theology and denomination. And what I think is important is for those clergy in the community to find the area of common ground. One, of course, would be their faith in God. And that would be, I believe, a good starting point to address the fragmentation that currently exists within the community. I say that because from my own experience, I say replicating an organizing model. My own experience in Central Brooklyn churches, where I was the executive director of a faith-based community organization, what was significant in that community is that their clergy were more, they engaged in more fellowship. There was pulpit exchange. If for nothing else, it would be around liturgical calendar. So one pastor would be in one church on, say, Good Friday, another would be in someone's church around some church anniversary. My experience is none of that is going on in the Southwest Philadelphia area. So it's very difficult for religious leaders to really come together if they're not even communicating around faith. The other example I'll lift up, oddly enough, is in Baltimore. There's an organization called Build in Baltimore. Marion Orr, who wrote a book about Black social capital, describes a period between 1989 to 1998 in which this alliance, faith-based community organization alliance, Baltimoreans United in Leadership Development, was very successful in building the capacity to address both the economic problems of that city at that time, as well as the educational ones. So my plan of implementation, the way I went about developing a sort of strategic plan of organizing within that community involved initially raising the awareness of the education crisis. It included meeting one-on-one with 8 pastors in that community, discussing with them some of the facts that were going on. Over the last 3 years, as discussions were being held in City Hall and through the State Takeover Board, which was the State Reform Commission, there was lots of conversation about the educational crisis. So I was trying to shape and refine it in such a way that it would be relevant to the community of Southwest Philadelphia. I did that through those one-on-one meetings I had with those eight clergy members. I was able one-on-one meeting within the Ezekiel Baptist Church through the ability of having a relationship with one of the associate ministers there. That pastor allowed me to drill down within his congregational environment to meet with members of his congregation, and what we were able to do is to form what we called a parent organizing committee within that congregation. And in doing so, not only was I raising awareness to the pastor, but it also gave me opportunity to raise awareness with them, to engage in some leadership development with them. And in doing that, I would use documentaries to sharpen their own sense of consciousness around the injustice of the public school system within the Philadelphia area. And the film Waiting for Superman was a very good resource, because not only did it capture the crisis here in New York City, but it also did spotlight the city of Philadelphia as well. One of the things that when we talk about the evolution of an organizing committee and the development of it, is that one of the clergy members of Ezekiel Baptist Church, Reverend Whitaker, was actively engaged with me in organizing the church community. And it was reflected in a sermon he gave on August 31st of last year, when he delivered a sermon in the church around social justice. The idea of timing it around then was because the church was holding its first action. And that action had to do with a back-to-school community prayer service. That was in September of that year. Why that, I think, was very significant, because the implementation of an organizing strategy at Ezekiel Baptist Church, the church that was the least likely to do it, validates the fact that an organizing model can make impact. What I mean by that is, as I will discuss later, I developed a framework around churches to understand why are they not more engaged. And I would categorize Ezekiel Baptist Church as being a church that represents the pious model, a church that is very righteous, conservative, and orthodox in its Christian faith, only about salvation and saving souls, and no community engagement at all. So I walked into an environment that was that way. The church's denomination is with the Southern Baptist Convention. So that gives you some sense of where this church sort of understands what faith means to it, right? So when we would talk evangelism, and they have been engaged in evangelism, but evangelism was strictly only to save souls in the community. It was not about empowerment of people. It was not about addressing issues. And so for us to move the church to a different paradigm, I think it bodes well. For one, the church, one of the pastors there to begin to preach on social justice, and the other thing is for the church to open its doors to hold a prayer service. Now, what organizing has taught me is that it's organic and it has to be framed and tailored around that environment. I couldn't start with a church like that addressing head on the educational crisis. So we did it through where they're most comfortable. Understanding for them, worship and liturgy is so important. So I framed it around having a printed out liturgy, which is a part of my written dissertation I share as an attachment, as a written liturgy of a prayer for the administration, prayer for the school, prayer for the safety of students. In a way, and of course we incorporated worship, we incorporated songs, and that was where that church was at its time in terms of its evolution in the organizing process. The research questions that I considered at the outset were framed this way: historical, theological, and around political injustice. So, has the early African-American church been influential in either the founding or supporting of educational institutions during the post-Reconstruction period? I found rich information on that area. It validated for me that there was this tradition within the African-American church that placed education as a primary importance in the life of a congregation, from the invisible institution of slavery to the earliest visible institutions right after slavery. African Americans were investing in literacy and education. I dare say we have departed from that kind of tradition. The other question was a theological one, right? Is there a biblical imperative that calls the church to be engaged in civic matters like public education? And certainly, this cohort, Micah, right? What does God require of us? To do justice, right? Love mercy and walk humbly before God. There is this sort of imperative that that the church must live up to, must fulfill. And it's around that theology where I was engaging in talking with the clergy. The political injustice question. Has a de-radicalization occur within the contemporary African American church? Right? It's a question I just wanted to open, and I engaged inquiry on that. And in many respects, Gaylord Gilmore had written the book Black Religion, Black Radicalism, in which he argues, I think very forcefully, that post civil rights era, there has been this rollback, this de-radicalization within the African American church. The methodologies of my project. I used a clergy survey. I surveyed eight pastors, and that was a way of me getting a sense of a couple of areas. I wanted to know about their own backgrounds. I wanted to know about their theological orientation. I wanted to also know about where was civic engagement in their own way of doing theology or engaging in religious life. So as I conducted interviews with them, in the case of in-depth interviews, those were conducted with children and adults from Ezekiel Baptist Church through those various meetings and one-to-ones that I held. And what was uncovered for me was the fact that many of those members, this gets back to my initial challenge statement, how the most resourceful parents are able to get their children out of the public school system so they escape the problem. They no longer have to address the problem. I found over and over again that the parents and families within that local congregation were able to get their children through contacts and other means into better, higher performing schools. And in doing so, they felt that they've solved the problem just for themselves, but not necessarily for the community around them. What I also did was clergy association meetings, and in those settings, I would raise the issue of education. And then, of course, as well, I served as a participant and observer. Wearing two hats, one in the role of clergy and my faith-based organizer. So how that would look, I would imagine we would have a meeting with several members of Give Back, and I would be probably sitting on the sideline. That's how we evolved. Initially, I would be front and center doing trainings, and ultimately, I was pushing people to assume more leadership roles, running the meetings, coming back with reports. Initially, I was doing all those things, but as we moved along over I think more than a year and a half in this effort, I decreased and their role increased. So it allowed me to step back and to observe their leadership emerge. So the competencies that I sought to work on were spiritual leader, theologian, and prophetic agent. With the help of my dissertation team and their guidance, I decided that those were the 3 areas I thought, given where I was on my journey and where I saw my work in this, is one being a spiritual leader. I have often been challenged by developing the right disciplines, prayer life, a life where I would have an opportunity to listen to God, where I wouldn't necessarily overextend myself or run myself ragged. And the other thing I did during the course of this time, it made me to push even further than that. And so I formed an affinity group. I serve as a chaplain down at the University of Pennsylvania. And so I formed an affinity group, which included other chaplains. So we could support each other. One of the things that I realize that many clergy are challenged by is that they often are isolated and they're not often engaged or have a support network. And in the workers' chaplain, that's often the case. So I formed an affinity group to help address that. In my development as theologian, I began the process thinking one who was often teaching on the word or preaching on the word. And then I moved to a point where I felt that everyone had capacity to be a theologian to the extent that they could theologize on and asking the question, what's God up to? What is God doing in the context of our lives, in the context of our communities that are in suffering? I was asked the question the other day by someone who is just spiritual but not necessarily religious, and he was saying to me, how do you shape prayers? And I've come to the point where I shape it, it's contextual. So I'm often in a context where people are wounded and broken. So I told them that I start my construction around prayer or teaching from a sense of being crucified and being persecuted, and taking it to a point where one sees also redemption and hope in a scenario like that. And so I described the situation in which I see God as an agent of poetic justice, where there's constantly injustice, evil, and wrong, and we don't often see him at work. It's always the scenario that Joseph talks about. What you meant for evil, God meant it for good. So that's the kind of theological evolution that I've engaged in. As you know, certainly in thinking about prophetic agent, it's about truth telling, of course, speaking truth to power. But it's also, for me, a sense where we have to look at our context, deconstruct it, and then reconstruct it. And you know, that sort of gets back to where I see the crucifixion and suffering in the lives of people, kind of deconstruct that in such a way where we know Zion is crying, we know there's wailing and there's pain in the community, and kind of reconstruct it in a way where it is redemptive and we can find some hope in it. And so there can be some righteousness that comes from that. And that our role in terms of being prophetic agents is restoring the breach, the brokenness. So new knowledge and understandings for me. As I was looking at sort of a framework of better where the African American church is today, as I said, I posited this sort of framework begins with, you know, churches are pious. I should say at the outset also that I looked at first century churches in the time of Jesus and the Roman Empire, comparing the Roman Empire to the American Empire. There were those religious sects. So one, of course, were the Pharisees, and the pious people are the Pharisees, who were so self-righteous, so holy. And so we have congregations that are that way today, and therefore they isolate themselves. They don't engage in community because the orientation is to be sort of in the world but not of the world. They don't engage, right? That's the pious model. The political model, as I see it, is very much like the Sadducees. And the political model is not framed around empowerment for the people, but it's more about self-aggrandizement. So in my work, I noticed that many of the clergy in the Philadelphia area play the role as broker, not as sort of liberator. And when I say broker, is that they want the access to the power structures for themselves and not necessarily make it available for the communities. And that continues to reinforce a sort of a disempowered model within the communities of Southwest Philadelphia. The other one, of course, is prosperity, which is very obvious, right? The name it and claim it one, right? And then, of course, the more ideal one is the one that's around prophetic, transforming lives of people, using the gospel as a way of quickening, enlightening people's senses, but of not spirit of fear, but of power, love, and sound mind, so they can stand up and make the changes in their communities. What I wanted to say, sort of in conclusion, is that I see, despite the challenges that exist within Southwest Philadelphia and within many communities outside of that, is this, there's a Kairos moment. As we even look at what's going on in Baltimore, I think crisis gives the community an opportunity to examine itself and make important changes. As in the case of Southwest Philadelphia, it's in crisis academically, but it's an opportunity. The seeds are there for it to transform. I believe that the faith organizing will kind of change where people, where lives will be transformed, people would be empowered, dropout rates will drop, and the underfunding of schools will change with certainly better finance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much
Okay.
for the
Questions?
work that you've done. Perfect timing, my battery went down.
Oh, okay.
Thank you very much for
Okay.
the work that you've done. We would like to have the opportunity for questions,
Yes.
comments.
Mhm. Yes. I think so.
Why is the public school system in crisis? We were in Alabama, and the president of one of the colleges was talking about in Memphis that they were basically, these white Republicans were shutting down the public school system and doing all these charters and privatized schools. And we have that going on in New York with Cuomo trying to do the
Yes,
same thing,
yes,
and de Blasio is fighting for the public schools. What is that about? And then where do you come down on that? And like, what is your vision of a good school? And then how can the faith organize that?
Yes.
And what kind of traction have you gotten? Like when Brooklyn congregations pulled there in South Philly, is there any organizational infrastructure, resources, and capacity to make the change?
Okay, great questions. And I'm gonna use your book, Faith Root Organizing, because one of the principles you raise in there is that theology from below, right? So where it starts is that families and parents have to make the system more accountable. The only way they can make it more accountable is when they become empowered. And the way we empower them is through organizing and training them. I do not expect our liberation or change going to come from the pharaohs, the city halls, the governors. It's going to come from the bottom up. And so the churches have the stake in it because that's where the people are. And if they make the investment to empower parents and families, we will see change taking place. I believe one of the struggles has been is that there is a wide disconnect in our communities today between and the community. Unfortunately, I see as a class divide, right? I'm troubled by what I see the trending, right? The trending is that people with resources opt out. And so we see it more because everyone wants their child, poor or wealthy, to have the best education, want the best education for their child. The people who have the resources are the ones that are getting it. They're not looking back what's behind them. I think if we read our Bibles correctly, we'll see that we have an obligation for the least of these. And so it's going to become very important for churches to kind of examine their theology, what they're doing, how they can become more relevant in those neighborhoods to make that kind of transformation. When we talk about a vision of what a school looks like, the more we empower parents, I have no doubt that they'll create the vision of what that good school's going to look like in their context. And that's a bottom up. We should not depend upon the district office, central district office, to always try to shape the neighborhoods. It's not cookie cutter. Each community is a little different. The more empowered they can raise their voice and determine what is necessary. All the classrooms are going to have to make sure that that the class size is proper. We have to make sure that the funding is important. The funding formula in Philadelphia is today what it was in New York until we had the campaign fiscal equity to fight that battle. So we had the state kicking more dollars. The city of Philadelphia is underfinanced because of the state financing only permits that funds would come from the local community through the real estate and property taxes. And those are things that must be changed long term. Yes.
I came in midway in your presentation, but I actually caught on. Great presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
Lived in Philadelphia for about 5 years, and I basically resonate with some of what you identified in terms of the school versus the churches out there, and the role the churches play in revitalizing the schools. I noticed you mentioned the film Waiting for Superman.
Yes. Yes.
I'm kind of curious to, you didn't say, or can you say a little bit more? What was the reaction of your audience after the film was shown, or during the film, or if you had any discussion on it? And here's the reason why I'm citing that particular example, which I thought was a great example in your presentation. That film was shown. I showed it my congregation.
Okay.
And the response I got from the public school teachers who were there, from parents who had their kids in public school, if they could have thrown me out, they would have. Wow. The reaction was extremely negative from the public school teachers. The Waiting for Superman film and the principles that film was trying to portray down the public schools and to elevate the private schools. So I showed that film also in Sing Sing prison with 14 men who were there, and every one of those brothers said that's their story in the film. So I was getting two separate responses, one from guys who were incarcerated who said yes, yay for Superman, but the people who were on the outside were saying, to hell with that film.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about what was the response.
Sure. So what we did afterwards was kind of open up and with the question of do you see yourself in any aspect of that film, right? The film portrays really haves against the have-nots, and it's tragic because it offers one a hope based upon a gamble, rolling of the dice almost, right? If your name is picked from a lottery, then you get chosen. I mean, that is a poor way to operate an effective school model. So the challenge for everybody is to say that we have to agree everyone is entitled to a good education. It ought not be based upon a lottery system at all. So there was a lot of soul searching that went on there because, yes, within the congregation, there were teachers that were there, but many of them were honest enough to say that the schools where they were in were low performing.
Wow.
Right, they were low performing schools, and they thought that the idea is that the funding formula, the inequity of public schools is not fair. There's the injustice, and what do we do about that? Many people felt that there's nothing that could be done. They felt paralyzed and powerless to the situation. But there was this sense where people did some soul searching, and they were able to see that there was an inequity, that it wasn't right that some people were able to get and others couldn't. I mean, part of it almost tears at your heart when you see young lives who are hoping for an opportunity at a good school. It does condemn the public schools being saying, "I want out," and which was also a problem for me. Right? I mean, there were parents that were in the group that were saying, "I want to get my child out of there," and the reality is everybody's not going to get our child out of there. So we have to fight to get it better in there.
I think you referred back to the historical Black church.
Yes.
And I think I've been in the Black church long enough, at my age, haven't been back there when it was a reality, and how the Black church really served as that place where it was as that faith-rooted organizing book talk about the grassroots.
Yes.
And so that the Black church served as so many multi-purposes. And it's about living right now. The afterlife was there, but the reality of the Black church, in my reality of the Black church, and the Black church, the premises around the Black church was to support the life and to prepare people to become, self-sustaining and productive, and for citizenship in this world as with Christian. But I'm not sure, and I think you looking at those models that you talked about, and I think that's the what you had pointed out. And if you look at the historical nature of the Black church and the present nature of the Black church, its roles have shifted.
Yes.
And so I think when you look at the Black church, and if it's gained its relevancy, it needs to study its history.
I think that's the point. I mean,
and I think that's critical.
Yes, it is.
Because I'm old enough to remember. That's what I'm saying.
Amen.
Yes, and being a scholar, and really knowing the church scholarly, and living it. And I think that's what I'm. So what you relate to that in terms of what you're finding?
Well, that resonated so well with me. I mean, the more I operated from a premise that number one, that there was a period where the Black church played a key role, and I didn't have any evidence at that point, but I just kind of believed it in my heart. The Black church, even so far back as slavery, played a key role in gaining literacy for the African American community, and it was well documented. One of the books I referred to, written by Heather Williams, is that the first thing we learned was reading through the Bible. Literacy started from being oral. We would read the lips. We would read the lips of our white masters, and then begin to parrot that to our brothers and sisters. And then when we're able to get our hands on the Bible, we often were self-taught and would risk our lives to teach others to read and write. We won't risk our lives for education anymore, but back then we did. What a glorious past. And then even again, to the period of the 60s, to the extent that we would put ourselves on the line to make sure that this generation and yet unborn generations would be given opportunity to education. It was remarkable, and I just think that, some cultural shifts have occurred in our time now where we're more to conform and look more like the image of the world to the image of Christ it has become the problem. And I think organizing can be the salvation of the Black church. If we get back to that, we can say we'll save the church.
Any other comments? We need to bring this to a close. I just wanted to say that I appreciate your work. I'm excited that you come to this point. It's very heavy for me, though, and I think for all of us, because the issue, it's the issue of education.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned Baltimore. And I'm sure you prepared this before Monday night.
Yes.
The thing that gave me hope, though, and as I think about maybe a solution, we see so much violence and we see so many problems that in order to keep our sanity, we just sort of push it aside in different ways. But to see that the church, what's the pastor's name at the church in Baltimore? The pastor who did the funeral.
Yeah, Reverend Bryant, Jamal Bryant.
That he had opened his church, and one of the sessions that they were doing was teaching the teenagers how to do nonviolent resistance.
Yes.
That's
yes.
Okay, so you have one group of teenagers who will guess, because that's what they've learned to do.
Right.
They've learned it through television. They've learned in a lot of different ways, and we haven't taught them anything. Bring them, teach them how to do nonviolent organizing.
Yes.
And it takes me back to Birmingham when all planet, but it was when those children walked out of the schools and began to march.
Yes.
That change actually happened. Yes. So I'm wondering, do you think that might be a strategy for us today? That somehow organically all of our children just march out of these schools one day and say to the adults, we refuse to take this anymore. Do you think that the climate that we have in this country and the world today is conducive for that type of march with thousands of young people out marching in the streets?
I think it is conducive. I think the important thing is that discipline and training is so important to make that happen. One of the things that really troubles me is that given all the crisis that's going on, students themselves are posting on Facebook in Philadelphia, ashamed of schools they're attending, but they don't have any means of reading channel that actually be important. We're amazed to at how schools they were talking. There's a contract dispute on payment for teachers, the contract salary for teachers. The students walked out. That made attention. That gained news. It's that kind of energy that's so important. But the training has to take place. So when you mention what Reverend Brian is doing, that's where it's going to start. And I have no doubt, just like we've seen in the past, that when our young lives are putting themselves out there, it's going to open up the world to see we have to do something about this. But the church, I think, is the only and the best opportunity we have. With all its flaws, it's the best thing we have available to us.
Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're going to excuse ourselves for a moment.
Liberation. Just open up. This is on celestial. Thank you, Red. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, here. Nationally, he's right here in the city. So okay. What's his name? Peter Henson. Henson, yeah. And who was the pastor at the end who actually? I don't know. Is he from? He said he's from Queens. Oh. And I guess they're all either graduates or faculty here.
I know he's a faculty.
Oh, really?
I've seen this.
He's Russell.
Yeah, I've seen the pictures.
Mm-hmm.
Shows his website, school website.
Okay, I want to thank you again for all of the work you've done, and I want to thank you for your persistence.
Okay,
I know at the
amen.
beginning,
Yeah.
you had a problem getting into the church, and
Yes, yes.
and for some people they wouldn't have tried to push it anymore. And I'm happy that you did, and I hope that you will continue with this.
Yeah.
So now you have the charge of organizing this this mass children's march for the 21st century.
All right.
Because that will
In
give people
Philadelphia or everywhere.
a national walk. And so you have to start where you are,
That's
but
it. That's it.
something big like that to get the attention. So all of this stuff, we see it, everybody knows it's there, but we just keep going on day by day. The children,
But you know what I think that he said, which is critical, and you said was that this could be a youth ministry project.
Yeah.
That they're trained, the youth are trained inside of the churches
Mhm.
before you ask them to do something.
oh, absolutely.
Because I was a youth at Alabama State,
Mhm.
and that's what they did.
Yes,
The churches trained us.
yes.
And when we did that Alabama State in shut down those places, we were not allowed on those streets
Mm-hmm.
without having been trained by Dr. King and Dr. Abernathy, Dr. Sato. They trained us. If you couldn't cut it, you couldn't go out on the street.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we have to do. We have to train these kids, not let them go out willy-nilly.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have a national using that model that he used in Baltimore.
You know the pastor there?
In Baltimore? No, I don't know him. Not directly, no.
Well,
No,
that'd be nice if you get
Yeah,
to know
yeah,
him.
sure.
I want to be the first to congratulate you,
know.
Doctor.
It's been a journey. It's a journey, but she's right about persistence.
Yeah.
Amen. Amen.
Amen. Congratulations.
I think my team, those presidents, those answers, my most important team player.
Happy to get this degree over with.
God bless you, man. Thank you.
Good.
Hey, Wanda, can we take a photo?
Yes. Eleanor would shepherd.
I want to get you.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Oh, yes. So, oh, my brother. Yo, you know. I'm so proud.
Thank you so much.
Y'all would be great. Hello.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
And you're there with.
Oh, Kathy, can you take a photo of us?
Yeah, just thinking about that.
Yeah, 7,000 students on our
Given that where you were, we could have
Can you imagine if you get that?
Oh, the Brooklyn. I mean, so what Brooklyn?
Because that's what we
Wow,
do.
that was okay.
We train.
Now, what,
Wow.
I'm I know Reverend
Oh,
Jones.
right.
His father was
Yeah.
a bishop in
Yes,
our
yes,
church.
right. Yes.
Was Bishop Cousin, was he, because at one time, he was head of the Alabama district, but I met church.
That was
And my
so many
pastor
years
went
ago,
to
baby.
ASU. Okay, I'm just curious.
That was 100 years ago.
Kurt.
That was so long.
Okay,
Let's
come home.
Yes,
Let's take a photo. Everybody call in. Dr. Gill. First lady beside him.
That's right.
Right here.
Yeah.
Photo.
Okay, everybody. Yes, it's the first thing right here.
He's gonna take it right here.
It's in the wrong direction.
It's right here
Oh,
on
okay.
the, like, on the front.
Oh, okay.
Against here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Chef.
Well, now,
Yeah, they got you moving in the wrong.
I know we can.
Okay.
Okay, move on some. Yeah.
So
All
we're
right,
all the
everybody in
doctors.
together.
yeah, closer,
Okay,
closer,
all right,
closer.
all right, closer together. Yeah, I can stand closer if we can. Show you. Yeah.
Ready? 3, 2, 1, smile.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you,
Yeah,
thank
this
you
is
very
a
much.
really
Thank you.
relevant.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is relevant.
You just take it, don't worry. We'll get this
Did you get my
together.
email about
Nah,
camera?
Thank you.
Should they-
I heard.
You didn't give up on me either.
Yeah.
That's all.
I did.
I can see the voice thing going on.
Right, and when I'm in here, you can see everybody here.
Somebody else going to talk to us, get to know.
And I'm not sure what happened.
You're talking about for this year or next
Yes,
year?
that's what I'm normally.
Okay,
Yeah.
no, we haven't got
It
anybody.
looked like it was working.
Not for this year, for next year, right?
For this year.
Oh, no, we were waiting for you.
Yeah, I sent you an email.
Yeah.
Wow, wow.
Right.
No, I was.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
They're ready to go. They just need some wisdom and training and.
And I'm.
Oh, as a professor, correct? Yeah.
Yeah, that's my thumb drive over there.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Is my thumb
That's
drive in
fine.
there still?
Yes,
That's fine.
yes,
Because I have
That's
to,
fine.
yeah,